In this video, we're going to talk about virtual machine hard drives. If you use virtual machines for teaching and learning and development and application isolation and all the wonderful things that you can do with virtual machines, and if you're unsure about what I'm talking about, check out some of my other videos where I talk about virtual machines and how to use them. But if you're using virtual machines, you'll know that one of the challenges with them is that they take up space. When we create the virtual hard drive, it takes up space, and as we get more and more virtual machines, we start running out of space. But if we understand how virtual machine hard drives work, which is what I'm going to talk about in this video, then we can manage that process. I'm going to show you how we can move virtual machines around. I'm going to show you how we can duplicate a virtual machine, make a copy of it, and share it out with a whole bunch of different people. This is especially useful if, let's say, I'm teaching a class on Linux and I want to make sure that I have 10 exact same copies of the Linux distribution on 10 different machines. Easily done. I'll show you how. I'll also show you a secret that I use to have a huge, basically unlimited library of virtual machines that I can have available when I need them, but I can put away when I don't. Let's go take a look at virtual machine hard drives, an essential skill for managing our virtual machines and making them work for us. To understand virtualization, we look at the basics of a computer. A computer has various different resources. We have an operating system, and that operating system controls those resources and lets us use them. We refer to this as our host system. Now, if I want to put a virtual machine on a host system, I'm basically sharing all of the resources of the computer with a guest system. Now, when I turn off the guest system, it returns everything back to the host except for the disk space it was using. With the disk space, every virtual machine will take space from my host system's resources, which can really add up. Now, I could push those out to an external drive and store virtual machines there, but what ends up happening is I wind up with a lot of external drives to house all of my virtual machines, and that can make it a little bit confusing as to where my virtual machines are. Now, a virtual machine is comprised of two parts. There's a config file, which is small, and then there's the actual hard drive file, which is quite large, and we link those things together. Well, what we can do is we can unlink the config file, move the hard drive file, and then when we copy or move it to a new location, we can create a new config file to control it. So a great solution is to store these virtual machines in a cloud service, pull them down when we need them. Now, for myself, the cloud service that I like to use is sync.com, so I'll bring it out to sync.com, synchronize with the cloud, because sync gives me another layer, which is called the vault, and that's unlimited storage. So I will use that vault to store lots of virtual machines, then I will bring them to the sync cloud, sync it with my local machine, and I can have one virtual machine at a time on my local machine, put them back to the cloud, put them back into the vault. Let's take a look at how that works. So let me show you how I practically manage this process. So here I am in sync.com, and I'm going to work from sync to my local machine and then create a VM. So I have a whole bunch of virtual machines. I have them all in directories in the vault section of sync.com. That is not synchronized to my local computer, and that's a good thing because I have unlimited storage here, and I could have terabytes and terabytes of virtual machines. I actually have, certainly upwards of a couple terabytes stored here. Now, that's not going to be good if it does synchronize to my local machine because, of course, I don't have that much free space on my hard drive. So I can store unlimited amount of virtual machines here in this vault. So for example, I have this Data Sandbox directory in here. Underneath Data Sandbox, I have a couple of directories. For example, I have an older SQL version in here. I can look in here, go further into the directory here. And the big file that I'm looking for is this SQL 2016 Sandbox VMDK. That's the hard drive. That's my virtual hard drive. But it's in the cloud, it's in the vault, it's in that unlimited storage space, and what I need to do is I need to bring it to my local machine if I want to create a virtual machine locally and start working with it. Well, what I've done, and I'll go to my files, is, well, actually go back to the vault. If I take that directory and I choose that directory, I can move that directory to the files section of sync.com, and the files section is synchronized with my local computer. Now I can choose which files or folders are synchronized, but in my case, I do have this VM Ubuntu that I did synchronize. I moved it from the vault to the file section, and you will see that in my computer here, if I just go here, in my file section, underneath the sync directory, I have this VM Ubuntu, and there you can see I have this 12 gig hard drive, virtual hard drive, that's been synchronized to my local machine. Now I do give myself a little bit of time, so let's say for example, next week I was going to be teaching some data tools with Ubuntu Linux or some Python or something. What I could do in anticipation of that is I could move it from the vault, move the entire directory into the file section, let it synchronize with my local computer, and it could be multiple local computers by the way, but this is my local computer here. And then what I can do is I can open up VMware. So I'm making my virtual machines on VMware. You could make them with other products as well. So you'll notice here I don't have any defined virtual machines. So I'm going to create a new virtual machine. When I create the new virtual machine, I'm going to choose the custom installation, and I'm going to accept a lot of defaults here. It's going to be a VMware Workstation. I'm not going to install an operating system now. I'm going to install it later. In fact, I'm not going to. I'm just going to attach an existing virtual hard drive. So I take the default. It'll be a Linux machine. It'll be Ubuntu Linux. I'll give it a name if I want to. So it doesn't matter what I call it, but I'll call it data for the data sandbox there. Now, this will create the configuration file, that small file, and that'll put that in my documents directory. I'll accept the defaults for processors. We're going to accept a lot of defaults here. I might give it a little bit more RAM. So this is a nice thing as well. So it could be that, for example, my computer has 32 gigs of RAM. Maybe I have a different computer that only has 16 gigs, or maybe one that only has 8. When I create the virtual machine to attach the hard drive to, I can adjust the resources. So I'm going to go into Next, and now choose Network Address Translation, choose the standard BIOS, the standard board, the standard type of disk. This is the important screen. I'm not going to create a new virtual disk. What I am going to do is use an existing virtual disk. And the virtual disk I'm going to use is the one that I moved from the vault to the file section, synchronized with my computer, and now have in my local computer in that sync directory. So I'm going to use an existing virtual disk. I'm going to browse for it. I'm going to browse to the sync directory, VM Ubuntu. There's the hard drive. That's the hard drive I'm going to use. Now when I click Next, I can just start this machine, and it could be that this virtual disk has a whole bunch of different applications installed. I've got my security on it. I don't need to reinstall it. I just need to power it on. And when it powers it on, it's going to recognize that disk. So this is just some devices like the CD-ROM, so I don't need that there. But I'll go in here. This is for the VM tools, so I finished installing those. So now what it's going to do is take that hard drive, and it's going to use that in order to build the virtual machine. Not really build it, just connect to it really. So as you can see, I'm not having to install anything. I'm not having to configure anything, because I did that when I created the original virtual machine. Then I saved that virtual hard drive into the vault in sync.com, and now Ubuntu is booting. I'm not having to install it, and any authentication, any accounts, any programs, anything that I've created in this virtual machine will automatically be there for me. This is the account I created, and I can just log in and even use the password, of course, that I created. And now I'm logged into Ubuntu. And now this one here, I just set it up for this demo, so I haven't really installed a ton of unique configuration in here. But what's really interesting is that, let's say I wanted all my students to have this exact version of Ubuntu running. So let's say I did install Python and I did put sample scripts in there and I really configured that virtual machine. What's really interesting here is that I could just go into my machines here, say this Ubuntu, I can choose that folder and I could share that out to them. So I could actually share out a link, and it doesn't have to be a collaboration, it could just be read-only, and then the students could come there, download the virtual hard drive, have VMware Player running on their computer, which is free, and then I could show them how to connect to that hard drive that I created, and now everybody has the exact same machine. Now, there are licensing issues, so if I'm doing that with Windows, I may have to have it unactivated when I distribute it, and then they can use their Azure for Education activation code in order to activate it. That's a topic for another day. But Microsoft is quite generous, at least in the academic world, in terms of giving out a lot of free licenses or trials. And certainly Linux is something that we use all the time, and it's very easy to distribute the virtual hard drive pre-configured. Now that you understand virtual machine hard drives, I hope that you have a way to manage them a little bit more effectively and you feel comfortable moving them around, duplicating them, and working with them. Interact with the video. You could like it or share it or comment on it. All the interaction options are down below at the bottom of the video, and I hope you will. I'm really interested to know how you're managing your virtual hard drives, or any comments that you have on skills that you'd like to learn around teaching and learning and technology. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.